Let's try it. Okay. Steve, thank you for joining the Inspire podcast. Dear friend, this is going to be fun. As you know, this is relatively unscripted. The podcast byline that I'm still trying to work on getting clarity around for myself is life and leadership conversations that go deeper. And I kind of thought after the first intro episode, this is an intro to the first season. And the first season, I envision talking about the I and the N of Inspire, the acronym. And the I is identity, the N is what's not our identity. And then the spire part, which we'll get to later, is spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. So today's purpose is for us to meet and greet, and then for us to kind of unpack what is in store in this first season of this podcast. I will start with a quote that I think I mentioned last time, but I really love. It's an old Latin proverb, and I won't read it in Latin. I'll read it in English. It is absurd that a man rule others who does not know how to rule himself. And I just think that getting to know our identity will help us to rule ourselves better and therefore others better. And I think the only other thing I'll say is that we in our culture suck at this. We just don't have clarity around who we are, what is our identity. And I think that you and I both talked about this. If you know your identity and can stay in that lane, then your leadership is optimized and you can make better decisions and influence the people you need to influence and do the things you need to do as a leader. But if it's not, which is, I would argue 80 or 90% of leaders are not in their identity lane and they're leading from the opposite or some other place that's not their identity. Um, Steve, tell me why in the world are you doing this with me?
In the world am I doing this with you? Um, well, I think you've been my coach now probably close to 10 years. I'm retired, but you've been close to 10 years, and we've developed a great relationship with each other. And for me, it's been a wonderful journey. And if somebody can garner something from the journey that you and I have been on together, I think that will be really, really cool. If there's a few people we can go out and inspire, sorry, no pun intended, but inspire people to really work on becoming the best person they can be, I think would be phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I'm so happy to do it. And I'm so happy to spend some time with you doing this.
Yeah, and beautifully said. And I guess we're talking a little bit of identity. What is your thoughts around this topic?
Oh wow. It's interesting. I was thinking about this last night, and the whole idea of the self-identity I and the N being what's not your identity, and the 10-year journey that you have been on. When we first started, that N of what I wasn't, what kind of the saboteurs, if you will, in the room were a big noise in the back of my head of what I'm really not, where I'm failing, where the things are where I'm letting people down. That was a huge noise in my room, in my ear and in my head. And we spent quite a bit of time working on the I and talking about how wonderful the I is and how wonderful the I can be. And it's quieted that noise in my head tremendously, to a point where I certainly feel like I'm mentally the healthiest I've ever been in my life, and mentally the strongest I've ever been in my life.
Yeah, and I think I've led a parallel journey with you as well. Just wow, I was so struck when I went to a men's group a few weeks ago, and the question was asked, "What's your identity?" And crickets. I mean, no one, I didn't know where to start. And I love that you and I both have that cherished work that we've done to have some clarity. And we're no near perfect in it, but definitely know that this is my lane, and I'm pretty clear on places where I'm out of my lane, and that makes me a better husband, a better father, a better fill in the blank. So
Yeah,
yeah,
better leader.
yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
yep.
and I guess who people are listening, it's just more of, I think, don't worry, we're going to unpack this. We're going to get after this. I think this was just kind of a meet and greet, to kind of introduce the concept. Um, there's so many tools to deepen and enrich our understanding of this. Now, I think it might be good, the framework that I'm thinking of just as a template, so that people, if they're going to nerd out and walk alongside us through this, is if you have a sheet of paper and you imagine three circles. I think it's a good template. Like last time we did a coaching wheel. This time I would
Mhm.
envision a big, huge circle and then two more circles. So concentric circles, like a bullseye. And in the very middle circle, you write something like identity or true self. The next circle out, you put in there unwanted self or unwanted identities. And then the last outermost circle is not identity, false selves, false identities, whatever you want to say. But that conceptually is what we're going to cover. We're going to double click on each of those so that the unwanted selves lead to the false selves, which is all about not identity. And then the true self, the inner circle, is where we want to get to and say, if there's enough descriptors in there and enough um, values in there that I have clarity and I can turn to that and stay in that lane, then I think we've really arrived at knowing our identity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that. I love this exercise. It's been one of my favorite exercises. You and I have been through it a couple of times, and it's been one of my favorite exercises to work on that. I like the description of a bullseye and working inside out.
Yeah. And so I think that's what we will probably use as a template in each of these sessions. We'll just kind of weave ourselves through different um, concepts that help us enrich and understand what the heck who we are. That simple question,
Right.
who are you? And it's like it stumps us. Like, how can we be so old and get stumped by a question like that?
But it happens. You get so focused on everything else around you, you lose sight of yourself
Yeah.
and what you bring. Right.
And I think you said it well. I mean, we've used the term saboteurs or false selves, but it's really, I think that there are these, when we're kids, there are these brain pathways that formulate that keep us out of trouble. They're the voices
Yep.
in our head that say, hey, stupid, don't touch the oven, it's going to burn you. And those are really adaptive and skilled for a 6-year-old. But when you get beyond that, they're unskilled. And we continue in our adulthood to listen to these unskilled voices that say this stuff over and over. And I think those largely are the drivers to keep us out of our identity.
I totally agree. To me, it's also amazing, though, sitting in as many meetings as I've been in, how many times those people come out in the meetings versus the true selves in the meetings, right? Those saboteurs are the ones who unfortunately show up often. And getting back to the true self always brings the team back in and in focus.
And I'm going to just pause in what you said, unpack it, because I think that if you're hearing that for the first time, you're like, wait, what? I what Steve, and jump in if I'm missing this, but what Steve is saying, I think, is wow, we are sending into these meetings our false selves, our saboteurs, our outer circle. We're not even showing up authentically. And by doing that, it creates havoc and tension and craziness. And if we can be mindful enough to show up in our true identity, then we're doing what we were designed to do. We're in the right lane.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Just to add on to it, your trigger for me to go there was the 6-year-olds, and I don't know how many times I've been in a meeting where it feels like a few 6-year-olds show up. It was like, Hey, how do we get back to adulthood here? How do we have a deeper conversation? We're fighting over turf wars or something like that within a meeting, but hey, we have a goal to accomplish. We have something we need to do. Let's unpack, let's get the turf wars behind us. We don't need a leg wrestling match in the middle of the recess. Let's get on and move on and move on to the important things.
And I just got a flashback to Mrs. Straw's kindergarten class and the sandbox that I hung out in, right?
Exactly.
It's,
Exactly.
yeah, that's very well said. Yeah.
Did somebody
Yeah.
take the Tonka truck or
Yeah.
yeah,
Quite
yeah.
literally and figuratively in your neck of the woods back then. So I think we're touching on what I kind of wanted to touch on too, is like, what are the consequences of not knowing who we are? And I think you just shared one, is that it creates tension and hostility and um, narrow-mindedness and fixed mindset versus growth mindset. What else comes to mind when you think about like what are the consequences of not knowing who we are?
I think there's almost a pain that you go through internally if you don't know who you are, because you're letting these saboteurs, this negative, rule you, and you're not really getting to be your design self, blessed self, best self, whichever way you want to describe it. You're not seeing that beauty that comes out in your abilities and your personal own strengths. You're living in this, just call it a hell of people, of different voices inside your head talking you down all the time. It's
Mm.
not a pleasant place to be. It's not a happy place to be.
And I'm going to ask you a weird, maybe pseudo rhetorical question, but would you consider or argue that living from these, and we're flipping back and forth between the term saboteur and false self, which are synonymous. Those are the same term. Would you say that that creates burnout and fractured relationships and a large percentage of all the stressors in our life? Or
They're a huge portion of the stressors in our life. Um, with it's a burden that you carry. You carry these false selves or saboteurs with you everywhere you go, and shedding those is just like it's like you've got physical people in your backpack, and you as you shed these people, your backpack gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And that lightness then allows you to do more, move faster, move more fluidly. Um, all of those things come with shedding that backpack of saboteurs. And if you were hiking through the forest, it's like you get rid of those saboteurs and then you get to the mountaintop and there's just like a freedom that comes with it.
and I love that metaphor, and I will add to it. I think what we're doing is we've got the backpack on, and we get to the top of the mountain, and we're totally exhausted, and we can't enjoy the view. And then we look in the backpack, and we've put rocks in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't empty it. That's totally what happens. You're too exhausted to enjoy it.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
With the fight on the way up with your spouse or whatever it is, fill in the blank. Um,
The kids, the family, the siblings, the you name it.
yeah, I, the other thing I wanted to share, I think that comes to mind is the idea of like, well, can we do this? And I was going to share the story of I think it's the guy's name was Schwartz. He was a psychiatrist out of UCLA, and he did some work with kids with obsessive compulsive disorder. And what he said to them was, "You are not your OCD," which is such a profound statement. It's like you are your unique Steveness, and your obsessive
Yep.
compulsive disorder thoughts in your head are separate. They're a brain chemistry that is a wiring that's not great. So and that separation had transformative power for them. And the point I'm getting at is there's such a thing in medicine, neuroplasticity. And we, like, I think it was pre-80s, thought that the brain was the brain and you were stuck with what you got and you couldn't change it. And now what's emerged is this term neuroplasticity, which is the idea of we can train our brain and change our brain. And Swartz took a PET scan, which is this like picture of a brain lit up with different colors. And when he did the PET scan for the kids that were suffering from OCD initially, these areas of the brain lit up in red that were being fatigued because they were stuck. And then he said, among other things, you're not your OCD, personify it, take it out there and name it something and move it out of the way. And whenever it shows up, be intentional about moving it out of your backpack, so to speak.
Right.
6 months later, he re-PET scanned these kids and their PET scans normalized. And
Wow.
he was a little stumped. I think he was like, wow, that means that I might have a mind outside of my brain that can modify my brain. And therefore, there might be something else immaterial going on. So he got really philosophical about it. But for our purposes, which would be the argument of substance dualism, by the way, but for our purposes, the idea is really we can rewire our brains.
I I can't I want to use an example just that you and I have worked through, and I don't know that you even realize it maybe so much, but and it would be interesting if we would have done PET scans when we first started coaching it now. But as you knew, one of my huge saboteurs came from my dyslexia. I am a dyslexic and I struggle with my brain thinks one thing and it gets communicated in another way often. And I read things in a different way. And getting to the point of accepting my true self of he is smart and not letting the dyslexia go to my negative self or my saboteur of he's not smart, being able to flush that has absolutely been huge in my life, and honestly embracing it. I mean, I read some funny things that other people are never going to be able to read. My brain looks at things differently than other people, and embracing that difference and that gift, you start to look at it as a gift instead of a curse or a deficiency. It's probably not the same as OCD, but the story is a similar vein.
Yeah. And permission to lean in a little bit.
Yeah,
Just the language I think is important as we proceed is I am a dyslexic is I have dyslexia.
yeah, yeah.
And the other thing you said is I am smart, but I would say you're brilliant. So I think I would just, you're down, maybe some saboteur or false self came in the room and turned the volume down, but you're in the category of brilliant and you have dyslexia. You aren't, yeah. So just weird nuance.
Yeah. And the verbiage in there was a little self-shaming.
Well, that's what we all do, right? We downplay ourselves. That's okay.
Yep,
I can call you out on it. Um,
yep.
we,
Thank you.
there's tons of frameworks for all this stuff we're going to cover. I had a laundry list of things, but I guess the three circles that we talked about is kind of like my framework. That crazy little here, I'm going to do it to myself. Little brain Drew um, is going to, I think use as a template, but there are internal family systems work out of a guy out of Harvard. There's a constellation of who you are internally. There's mansions with many rooms. I like that metaphor. There's a boardroom. The idea of like, the true self is embedded in the boardroom of our brainscape. Um, One of the coach training places I did training in call it inner leader and allied team. So the idea that their inner leader is the true self, and then the allied team is all those parts of us that are part of the true self. And then there's probably, I don't know what they call it, but unallied team, the other characters, that are in the outer circles. So those are some of the different um, frameworks, I guess, that people have used over the years and years and years of unpacking this stuff. Um, what else? Anything else you feel like we need to cover in this kind of intro gig?
Oh Lordy, I just had something that well, one of the things on that list of you and I talked about it. We're kind of mixing a bunch of books together that we've been through. Um, but
Yeah,
the judge that we have in the room, our self judge, the we have all of these other saboteurs out there, but the judge is really the big one, right? And and the quieting of that voice, and the ability to quiet that voice, I think is another blessing that I've had working with you. That voice is much quieter, and my wife would attest to it. I mean, she watched me beat myself up unmercifully at times, and now, okay, mistakes happen, and you just kind of shrug your shoulders and smile, embrace it, and move on. So, you know,
yeah.
quieting that heavy judge is really huge for people, I think.
And if you can look at, I'm looking at the horizon only because I've got my bookshelf and it's like, it's filled with those books that say quieting the inner critic.
Yeah,
The book by the guy out of University of Michigan. I'm blanking on his name, but anyway, he wrote a book called Chatter, which is that
yeah,
basically it's named after that voice, that inner critic that, you know,
yeah,
continues to talk to us. And Shazad's work, Positive Intelligence, which we're referencing a lot, is that idea of the judge, is what he named it. But that's the driver, I think, the main false identity or self, and that outer circle is that judge voice, that inner critic voice,
yeah.
and recognizing that alone and starting to manage, wait, that's not me. That's some other brain neural pathway that was forged when I was a kid to keep me safe, but now it's very unskilled and it says some really bad stuff I don't need to listen to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might be alive, but it's not doing you any favors right now.
Yeah. Um, Good. What
Yeah.
else do we need to cover? I guess I could share a little bit. Like, I think the rest of the season episodes will go down what we just covered. We're going to talk about what is our true self? How do we name it? How do we claim it? What does it look like? What are the tools we can use to unpack it? Um, and then we will go into, I think, that idea of false selves. What are all the different false selves we carry with us?
Yes.
What are they saying to us? How do we manage them? And then unwanted selves, and then unpack those. And then ideally, if people are listening along through this X number of episodes, by the end of this season, they would say, I am confident. I have it on my desk. I am playful, confident, mischievous, like Calvin and Hobbes, ready for action and more than enough. Are they going to come up with maybe a little clarity about who they are? What's their real self so that they can know that they're showing up that way?
I love that. I'm not playing Calvin ball
Yeah.
with you, by the way, but that's a different discussion.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
So I think we're going to pause for today. So that was awesome. And you guys know how to reach me. So if you have any questions, please jump in and reach out to me. And I will see you guys next episode.